It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land I'm standing on today. I extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who listen to this podcast. My next guest is an expert in child psychology, and as I always say that I believe mothers are the original entrepreneurs, it was super important for me to help anyone, myself included, that had and could influence children to understand some of the basics when it comes to the psychology of their decisions as well as ours. Her name is Kari Sutton. Apart from all the qualifications on why she is perfect to talk about this, she has spent over 25 years caring for children aged 0 to 13 living with cancer in a program called Camp Quality. Also, she is a child resilience expert.
I talk to families, I talk to parents and educators and early childhood educators as well, because we have the largest social experiment ever going on. This year, absolutely. But before this, outside home childcare is a large social experiment. We don't know fully what the outcomes are, because particularly in Australia or in most Western cultures, it's underpaid work, it's undervalued work, and it's not seen as a prestigious thing. Whereas in other places of the world, caring and raising and being a mum staying at home is one of the most important jobs you can do, because you are raising the next generation. When parents are going, oh, crap, I wish they'd go back to school. I can't stand this. Oh, you little mongrel, would you stop doing that? And it may be said out of frustration. And as I say to people, look, I'm not picking on parents. We are all doing the best we can. But if that's what they hear more often than not, then what that child is going to grow up with and look in the mirror is, oh, you mongrel. And just we say to ourselves when we're older things that we would never, ever say to anybody else. We are so cruel, so nasty, and yet we would never say that to a person we love. And where that comes from is childhood. And how did people talk about us? How did people view us? How did we view ourselves? We've got to teach kids to take care of their mental health. And one of the ways, the most critical way we can do that, let's teach them that this itty-bitty crappy committee, the thing that sits on their shoulder, they can argue with that. That's not the truth. That's not who they are.
Hi, I'm Maya.
And I'm Darius.
And we have to talk about something.
It's bullying.
When people think of bullying, they think of kids getting shoved into lockers or having their heads flushed in a toilet. But the truth is, bullying can be a lot more complicated than that.
Bullies use their power to hurt or control others. And they might make you feel unsafe in places where you should feel protected.
And that's not okay. Your school, sports teams, and after-school clubs have to be safe spaces for everyone. There was a time when I didn't feel welcome at school. Some girls that I thought were my friends had decided I wasn't cool enough for them. Everywhere I went, they either laughed at me, made fun of me, or ignored me altogether. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, there was a time when I didn't feel safe at school. I started to dread coming to football practice because one of my teammates would always take the drills too far. It didn't seem like anyone noticed. I mean, the coach was too busy focusing on the whole team to see me being bullied.
That was a clip from a video done by Fight Child Abuse that helps children understand what they shouldn't stand for. But here's a story we covered in volume 46, told by Mandanara Bales.
What we're talking about is systemic racism. My daughter, 14, at a private school, when George Floyd passed and the Black Lives Matter, the protests happened in the US, her friends at a private school here in Brisbane, her friends, one of them said, well, he was just a nigger. My daughter, being Fijian Aboriginal, is very dark. She said, you cannot say that. You cannot say the N-word. And she's referring to a dead man. Everyone saw how he died. And this young 14-year-old privileged white kid says that he was just a nigger. And no one pulled her up except for my daughter, because my daughter was the only person of colour. And my daughter said, you can't say that. It's so inappropriate. You just cannot say that. And she says, well, I'm not calling you a nigger. My daughter came home and she just cried. She says, I just hate that school. I said, no. That's just one individual. And you know what? Doesn't matter what school you go to. You live in a society that was built and founded on racism, right? White superiority. They saw that their culture and society was more civilized than our culture and society. I said to her, we live in a racist society and racism has become normalized. So I said to my daughter, if you want me to move you, I'll move you. But this is the best school. You're going to get the best education, the best support. And one day, the people that you're connecting with and building friendships with, they're going to be people in high society. They're going to be people that you might need to call on later on because you just went to school together. So for me to put her into a school like that and for her to have to just suck it up and deal with that as a 14-year-old, that breaks my heart.
So I had to tell this to Kari and get her response. The first part where she can't even believe that those words were used, we removed. When Kari finally gathered her thoughts, she said,
but so often what our children regurgitate is either what they've seen online, what they have lived with, frequently what they've lived with, more than often, particularly for little people. And this is, it's interesting, I have a Facebook page up and there was two little girls. One little girl was wearing an Elsa costume. She was a little African-American girl. And then the other little girl was a white American girl. And the mum took a photo and she said, my little girl just ran up to me. So hers was the Caucasian little girl. And she said, I found my twin, Mum. I found my twin. And they were there because they were wearing the same clothes. And as I said, racism is taught. Children don't see colour. I came out to Australia. I had a lot of Indigenous friends because of where we lived. And that wasn't a big deal. Like black, blue, brindle, I don't care. I love the person you are. And children are like that. They don't have the ability to see colour in that way. They don't see difference in that way until it is taught to them or until it's spoken about. And it is that where we have to really understand, what are we teaching our kids? What is our unconscious bias? Because let me tell you, schools have an unconscious bias. Society, the society you grow up in, has an unconscious bias. Australia thinks of itself as a multicultural and successful society. There's actually an unconscious bias that is going on here and has been going on for hundreds of years. And are we perpetrating that in the things we have on TV, in the conversations we have, in what we teach our kids at school?
The voices in our head. Philip McKernan refers to the biggest bully. Well, I'll let him tell you.
we don't like ourselves. So many of us don't like ourselves. We're afraid of how humanity will judge us, but humanity will never judge us the way we judge ourselves. So we spend so much time and energy looking good on the outside, pretending we're happy on Facebook every single day. And very few of us are willing to actually look at the greatest bully that we'll ever meet, ever, that meets us in the fucking mirror every single morning of our lives.
And Mark Yerika Paulson told us about how our childhood informs everything.
You know, we can't be blamed for not having that present in our upbringing. It's like when you look at any adult who's grown up, you know, their childhood informs their identity and resilience and knowledge, etc., the way they move in the world and live in the world.
On that note, here's Kari.
Our biggest bully ever is actually what we say to ourselves. It lives inside our head. I call it the itty bitty shitty committee or the itty bitty crappy committee. And it starts in childhood. And that's my concern. This year particularly, what I'm worried about is I look at for a whole different reason. So for adults, we've actually had time to come inside and reconnect with what's important, to both do that, as I said, literally come inside, spend time with the people you care about or those sorts of things, really reflect on where am I going in my life? Do I want to stay on this mouse wheel that keeps running? What's important? And it's interesting to hear that when people are talking, they're going, you know, there are some things that we've had in our COVID isolation bubble that we don't want to lose. I actually don't want to have to go out all the time. I don't want to have to do that. But for the children, so that's the adults. For the children this year, what's concerning me a lot is that adults, there has been, and you would have heard it in conversation as well, a huge level of anxiety. And we felt it so anxiety, fear, uncertainty in the community in general. And this raising level of anxiety, unless children have lived with families or with people, whoever's in their village, unless there's a safe pair of hands that can say to the child, we've got this, what that little itty bitty crappy committee starts saying to the child, because from 0 to 8, their filters are not there. They do not, they're sponges. If you said to a child, and this is why I talk when I train teachers and work with teachers and families, you say to them, you know, even a throwaway comment like, oh, don't do that or you'll get COVID, and you know if you get COVID, this is going to happen. A joking comment like that can leave a child, that can go in and it can really affect a child. So it's that level of anxiety, they need to have those safe pair of hands to say, you know what, we've got you, this is okay, and we're going to get through it together.
In an interesting article by Beyond Blue outlining the importance of why children need to be both seen and heard, psychiatrist Marsha Sirota states that every person who's walked through my office door suffering from depression, anxiety, relationship or work problems, low self-esteem or addiction, has a history of some type of adversity in their childhood. Digging further into how to support a child properly through their early years, the article states that if a child is feeling anxious or stressed, they need to feel like they can tell a loved one. If they're going through a traumatic experience like bullying, they need to feel like they can tell somebody. And if they're behaving erratically, they need someone who will notice and take action, enlisting the help of a professional if need be.
What if there was a way to level the playing field and make sure that we deal with the itty-bitty crappy committee? What is the number one thing we can all do? All of us, myself included.
When they start doing it for themselves, they're a living, walking, talking example. So if they start taking care of themselves, if they have the ability to go, you know what, I'm feeling a bit cross at the moment, or so it depends. Little people, I'm feeling really cross at the moment. Bigger people, you've really, this has pissed me off. And again, not even you've pissed me off, because I'm feeling really angry. I'm feeling pissed off. I'm going to go to my room. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to come down, and then we're going to come back and talk about this. So it's about having emotional intelligence. It's about being that role model. It's about going, you know what, and saying to them and being willing to say and model things. So how knowing, do I have more of an optimistic outlook or do I have more of a pessimistic outlook? And what am I modeling for my kids? Because optimists have much better mental health, knowing that if there is some, whether it's a low-level anxiety, low-level depression, understanding that about themselves, going and addressing that and going, how can I work with my anxiety? But also saying to your kids, you know, sometimes, Mum, I do get a bit anxious, but this is how I deal with it. I take some deep breaths, or I sit and breathe, or I sit and think about certain things, or this is what I do to manage my anxiety, particularly if you are talking about tweens and teens, and being really open and saying, you know, I go to see a psychologist. It's just like going to see a doctor. Just like I take care of my physical health, these are the things I do to take care of my mental health. It's looking and saying, what can you do for yourself? Because ultimately what happens is you take care, do we have a gratitude practice? Because the ability to build in gratitude and to be grateful, even it doesn't, and I don't want parents to think that it has to be over the top and you have to do all of these special things. No, it's actually about just being, you know what, we live in I'm completely biased. We live in the best country on earth. Parents listening may have a gratitude practice, but even if it comes to thinking about 3 good things that happened today, and these are things you can do before bed at night. Hey, what's good that happened today? This can start at 2 or 3 years old, and it may be, oh, I really like those cookies that Grandma gave me, or I jumped in a mud puddle, and at tweens and teens, it's actually refocusing, because especially before they go to bed at night, really important to prime their brain for positive things. Because often we'll go through the day, and with this negativity bias, it's the amygdala that drives the negativity bias. Why we have a negativity bias, and I know I'm talking at 1,000 miles an hour now, but really the negativity bias is we Velcro the bad and Teflon the good.
Mark Goulston in volume 28 spoke about hashtag WMYST. It is a movement, and if you've seen me recently, I wear a blue wristband with the hashtag WMYST, which is a movement created by Dr. Mark Goulston, who told us this story.
I'll tell you something else, because you're from India, that'll touch you. So, you know, people email me, from around the world, and again, because of who I am, and I have organization challenges, so I'm just as likely to respond to an email from someone who's completely poor in India as I am to respond to a CEO from a Fortune 100 company. I got to figure this thing out, but I probably won't. And I remember there was this one young man who wrote to me from India. What was his name? Arun. And so, I guess I answered. He had a question. I said, Arun. And this is the power of just noticing people. I said, Arun, I have a question for you. What made you smile today? And he writes back, no one as famous as you has ever typed my name. So every day when I go to my computer, I touch the screen where you typed my name and typed your own name. That changed his life. That's how much doing so little can do. So, Ronsley, what made you smile today?
WMYST is what made you smile today. Constantly being in gratitude is a game changer. So that is your piece of practical application from this volume. Find a way to remind yourself about all the amazing things that happen to you on a regular basis. Anyway, I digress. Back to Kari and her work. More importantly, how the inner voice affects people we generally can't empathize with.
I work with kids with disabilities. And when you look at that and they say, when my wheelchair can't fit on certain, because there was a young lady who was going to a high school formal and she said, my wheelchair just didn't fit. I couldn't go. What does that say? And what does that then feed the little voice in her head about her worth? Because she was going to a formal and her wheelchair wouldn't fit it would not actually fit into this space. And she said, I just felt like a complete and utter somebody had to take me out of my chair. And she said it was so embarrassing, Kari. And those are the sorts of things where we look at and say, how are we addressing this? What are we feeding our children? What is being said that is perpetuating these beliefs in society? And not only these beliefs in society, but then also these beliefs about themselves.
We generally can't empathize with people that don't go through what we've been through and vice versa. To think otherwise is kind of foolish. This is the point where my mother's voice pops up saying, Ronsley, the most important thing you can give someone is being considerate about them. I have to say that is hard, but it's a journey. When we come back, bullying.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Our aim with this audio documentary has always been to build a strong community of entrepreneurs and creatives to provide a space where they can use their voice to share their authenticity with the world. As a valued listener, your voice matters too. We love to hear your feedback and ideas, so don't be shy to let us know how we're doing in the ratings and comments. If you have a message for our production team or know someone who would be a perfect fit as a guest, you can find out more information on how to share your input at psychologyofontrepreneurship.com.
Before the break, we were talking about some practically applicable gratitude techniques, being considerate, and the work that has brought us to have this conversation with Kari. Now, the big topic, bullying and how to stop it.
We are not actually going to stop bullying. And this is what I say to families all the way along. We need to give our kids the mental tools and skills they need to deal with bullies. So how do I reframe my thinking? How am I going to be more optimistic? How can I be hopeful? How can I do all of these sorts of things? The emotional intelligence to know, you know what, that bully actually is not very confident, they're being mean and nasty, they're envious, or whatever it is. It's giving our kids the mental tools they can use, because we are not going to stomp out bullying. I can tell you that now. Bullying is rampant throughout society. If you look at what happens in corporate, you look at even what happens in different educational systems or educational institutions, there is bullying all the way along. And so you're right. It is going to happen. We have to give our kids the skills and tools to deal with it. We can't just stick our heads in the sand, because I'm never going to stick my head in the sand and say bad things don't happen. Shit happens. Shit happens, and we have to give our kids the tools to deal with it. That's why I say resilience starts before they're born, but building resilient kids actually starts in very early years. And how do we talk to them? How do we allow them to experience failure, disappointment? How do we see when they're talking negatively to themselves?
And Kari, for children and little kids, are there ways for us to help them with situations around bullying?
How do we dispute thoughts? How do we dispute ideas? If they're being bullied at school, how do we deal with that? And you come home and say, is that true? Like, is what they're saying true, or is that just their idea? So if they say to you, you're a scrawny scrag, is that true? No, you're actually healthy. Like, this is what it is, and that is their opinion. And we teach them in saying it is not what people tell you is not always true, especially if they're saying nasty things to you. So when I talk about little kids, I say to them, how do we combat that? Is that true? Is what you're thinking to yourself? So if you go into a maths test and think, they said I'm a dummy, is that true? What proof do you have? You've done really well on your tests before. So again, if this was I'm dumb at maths, actually look at the results you've got. You've done well. So you're building a firm foundation on a positive belief. instead of allowing these, because it's almost like it's a vacuum. And not that I'm saying children are vacuous, it's not. It's just that if we allow bullies to fill our head, and what we focus on grows. And if we continually think, oh, you're scrawny scrags, that's what this person said. If we focus on that, that negativity is going to fill our heads, and we're going to find things to almost, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if they say, oh, you're a fat cow, you're going to find things that say, if that's what you're choosing to focus on, that's what they're going to do. So what we talk to kids about, and what I talk to families and teachers about, is saying, look, help them build positive self-belief, not unrealistic self-belief, but belief where you can say, you've done really well in this. You've done really well in this. That is just someone's opinion of you. It is not actually fact. I love you as your parent. I care about you. Ronsley, who's your godparent, he loves you. He sees all these great things. Look at all these strengths you have. These are the great things. That is just one person's opinion. Do you value that person? Is that person being a good friend? If they're a supposed friend, are they being a good friend? If they're not, we then look at, maybe you need to find some other friends.
Sociologists have been studying bullying for decades. They just don't call it bullying. They've always called it dominance behavior, that it's other people trying to overpower others. And it's just like the animal kingdom, you know, the alpha male mentality. That's what's happening on campus. And so when we understand it in terms of dominance behavior, people trying to have power over another, that helps us understand what to do about bullying when we really understand what it is.
All the bullying experts agree on one thing, that bullying is an imbalance of power, that someone's trying to have power over you. They want to see you lose and they want to win. You see, the experts say it's an imbalance of power. Let me put it this way. Let's say a bully says they hate your guts. I hate your guts. If you respond out of anger, shut up! The bully loves that. Never. I hate you. Don't care. You're hurting my feelings. That's the point, stupid. You see, the more upset you get, the more angry you get, the more fun they have.
That was author speaker Brooks Gibbs explaining bullying in the most simplistic terms, dominance behavior, which, by the way, even adults deal with, and adults do to other adults and kids, not knowing what they are doing. It is also best disguised by the statement, I just know what I want and I go out and get it. Well, that's a Ronsley opinion, by the way. So, Kari, what about when they grow older and become teenagers?
And then with teenagers, you go, you know what? That's not, that one, that is not okay that they would say that to you. But two, people in life are going to say things. People are going to be nasty. That's life. And we say that to little people all the time. So if I've been working with kids in the playground or dealing with bullying, I'll say, you know what? Not everybody's going to be nice all the time, but we don't have to listen to them. We don't have to put our hands over our ears either, but we don't have to choose to listen to them. We can go play with somebody else. So when they're teenagers or tweens and teens, what I say to them is, look, we actually have to critically, what else, why could they possibly be saying that? People who are bullies are often jealous. They're often envious or jealous. They're often not particularly confident themselves. So all of these things, they see what you've got, they want to be like you, or they want to rip you down. And allowing our thoughts to be consumed by what they're saying, or by believing what they say is true, is then us giving them space in our head. We don't want to give them space in our head. Bullies are like weeds in a garden. We need to pull them out, or what they say, we need to pull them out and throw them away.
In Australia, 59% or 2.3 million students nationally say that they've experienced bullying, with 1 in 5 experiencing it weekly. 4 in 5 students recognise the seriousness of the issue of bullying, with 80% saying that it's a problem in their school and 20% saying that it's a very serious problem in their school.
Hey, Kari, let's wrap this up, hey? Tools we can equip children, and big babies, quote the adults, to take care of ours, theirs, and everyone's mental health?
We talked about being strengths-based, or looking at the strengths and what are people's strengths. Really look at that. Understand what your kids' strengths are, because often what happens when you get together and you see a report card come home, people will look at the F or the D and go, oh, yeah, you've got to try harder in that. So many entrepreneurs I know and so many people I know go, I actually perform better. And I'm not saying, again, stick your head in the sand. If there are strengths that are really, if there are weaknesses that are really going to cause problems, we need to work on that, because life is a team sport. We actually have to help our children develop the skills to get on with other people, because that's how they're going to be successful. Now, I'm not saying that people on the spectrum can't be successful. Absolutely, they can be successful. And people who don't have good personal skills can also be successful, but life is a lot more challenging for them. So understanding how we can model, what do good friends look like? So I often say to family, it's about the 5. Are they trustworthy? So are they trustworthy when you look at that? And you can go through and say, are they kind? Then you look and go, these are the 5 things friends do, and then understand and go, are they being a good friend? Am I being a good friend? And look at those sorts of tools. So there's a whole wide variety of things, but we can also model making time for our friends. So, and also making time for our physical health, because physical health and how we keep ourselves physically fit, whether it be going for a run, a walk, doing certain things, playing sport, our kids pick up on that. And that's also part of their mental health, because the way we deal with our anxieties, or the way we deal with that, it might be that we go and play squash, or we go and play touch footy, or we go for a walk. It's those sorts of things where we have, these are the strategies I use. And so kids, honestly, when we look at that, and that's what I say to people, are you more optimistic or pessimistic? And to be honest, Martin Seligman said why he started really looking into psychology was, for a lot of reasons, he was a psychologist, but he really realized, I'm more of a pessimistic person. Can I learn to become more optimistic? And that's what started his study around learned optimism. Can you learn to be more optimistic? All of these are skills we can learn. We can learn how to be more human, how to really wire our brains effectively. And that's what I'm asking parents and educators to do. Understand things like gratitude, mindfulness, strengths, optimism. How do we understand emotional intelligence? Because these are skills you can learn. They're not innate. Yes, some people have strengths in them, but they're all things we can teach our kids. And we can teach our kids, just like giving them tool belts to fix a cupboard or to do those sorts of things, we can give them tools to take care of their mental health.
And finally, here's Kari's review of the year 2020.
How can we give our kids the best foundation? Because like you've said in your podcasts and different episodes we listen to, what are the foundations we're giving our kids? And this year, 2020 has been a reset for the whole world. It's actually been permission to stop. We have never had this permission before. There has never been a time in human history when everybody's gone inside. And whether that be literally, as in we've had to stay inside. And I think that, for me, one of the critical things that has come out of 2020 is, as we looked in March around the world and we saw empty streets, people inside, empty cities, that was actually the largest act of kindness ever on this planet. Because that was the biggest act of humanity, saying we care for other people, we care for the elderly, for the vulnerable, and what we are willing to do is curtail our activities and to put our lives on hold, go inside to protect others. So that's one of the first things that I've seen. And the second thing I've seen is that instead of being hamsters running on the wheel all the time, it's allowed us to stop and really think about our lives. 2020 is going to go down in history, I think, as a time where we got to reflect and work out what was truly meaningful.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
So I was very much influenced by my grandmother. My grandmother was a big part who shaped me, who kind of, showed me what is going through a real challenge is. I decided to become a sports teacher. I didn't know anything about it. I had no clue. I decided to work with track and field athletes in the U.S., with NBA athletes in the U.S. I also worked with UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I had an opportunity to go to the U.S. with my mom. That was the first time I actually got introduced to swimming. Now, I'm swimming for not catching ducks. I'm swimming for competitions.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Kari Sutton because she is a researcher, educator, author, and speaker who has helped over 25,000 parents, educators, and other people who care for kids. She helps by developing the skills and confidence to promote mental fitness habits in both children's homes, schools, early childhood facilities, and workplaces. She has been a teacher, deputy principal, guidance counselor, and consultant for families for over 30 years. She also has 2 books, Raising Generation XXL and Raising a Mentally Fit Generation. She is a resilience expert for children, a carer for humans, and an entrepreneur.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bunnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Kaylee Bunnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Hey, it's Kaylee from Must Amplify. I'm the sound engineer for this volume of Psychology of Entrepreneurship. I'm part of the team that made this production come alive. I work as a part of a global team with our studios based in West End, Brisbane, Australia. If you would like a podcasting checklist, email me at kaylee@amplifyagency.media. That's KAILI@amplifyagency.media. We specialize in finding your voice and making sure it's heard by the right people. If you are considering whether a podcast is a good idea for your business, check out our other show on shouldistartapodcast.com.